But most of you know that I live-at-home uncle. I'm a live-in uncle, right? I share a house with my sister and her husband and their 3 kids. And that's a joy, but it also creates challenges because I'm not the parent. And sometimes I think I should be. Because these kids, they got good parents. They don't always do things the way I would do them, because I'm always right, of course, right? But they do things, and they're good parents. But every once in a while, they'll just be doing things, and I have to hold my tongue. I have to clamp down. There are times when they tell the kids to go do something, and the kids don't go do it. They think this is a starting point for negotiations, a starting point for debate. So they'll come back with, I don't want to do this, let's do this, or let's do that. And their parents will go back and forth with them. And meanwhile, I'm just there stewing, kind of fighting my tongue, and I'm just thinking, just do what your parent says. Just do what your mom says, do what your dad says, right? But, most of the time, I hold my tongue. But that's how we are, right? Those of you who have had kids, you might remember how kids do that. Sometimes, often, a lot, kids don't do what their parents tell them. You might even remember being a kid and not doing what your parents told you. I remember being a kid during the summer, right? And you'd just be outside playing all day, and I'd come back in the evening, and I'd be in trouble. Because I'd be getting in trouble because you were supposed to do the dishes today, and you didn't do them. Okay, you know what I said? Oh, I forgot. I did, yeah, you've had kids. I didn't forget. I just didn't do what my parents told me to do. Because it's just how we are. It's what we do. I think Jesus understands this because Jesus actually tells a story about this in Matthew chapter 21. He tells a story about a man who's got 2 sons. And he goes to the first son, and he says, son, I want you to go out and work in our vineyards today. And this son, I guess he's like the kids in my house. He's just like, not doing it. And he just outright defies his dad. He's like, I'm not going to do it. But apparently after the dad leaves, maybe the son thinks about it a little bit. Maybe he thinks about how much his dad means to him. The son goes out, and he goes and works in the vineyards. Meanwhile, the father has gone to the second son, and he said, son, I want you to go out and work in our vineyards today. I need you to do that. And the second son says, sure, Dad. I'll do it. Just give me. Let me finish this up. But he never goes out into the vineyards. And so Jesus leaves us with this question: which son listened to his dad? And obviously, it's the first son. The first son said he wouldn't, but he ultimately did. And I think of that story, and I think a lot of times in our relationship with God, this reflects us. I think in our relationship with God, a lot of times we're like kids who aren't listening to their parents, even though we know we should. We're like that second son in Jesus' story who says, sure, I'll do it. And then we don't, because God tells us. He says, go bless others. Out of the abundance I have given you, go bless other people. And he makes it clear to us. He makes sure we know from his word, the scriptures. He makes sure we know that's one of the reasons I saved you, is so that you can go take my blessing to other people. He says, go bless others, take my blessing to the rest of the world. And we say, sure, God, I'm going to do that. Just give me a moment here, right? And then we don't go and do it. In our minds, we have every intent of obeying God. I mean, we don't intentionally disobey God. But in the end, a lot of times, we just don't do what he says when he says, go bless other people. And the question I had as I was looking at this week is why? Why do we do that? Because we know better, don't we? And as I thought about it over the past few weeks, as we've been preparing this sermon series, I came to conclusion of 3 reasons we don't obey God to go bless others. 3 things that hinder us from blessing others. And there are probably more. But these are the 3 I landed on. We're lazy, we're selfish, and we're afraid. Right? Because sometimes we don't take the opportunities God gives us to go bless other people because we're just downright lazy. We know blessing others, that's going to take effort, right? Yeah, that's going to take effort. I might have to actively go do something to help that person. I might have to go through the work of rearranging my schedule to make myself available. It might be as simple as I might have to go through the effort of getting off my seat and going to the other side of the room and helping that person. It all takes effort, and we know it's going to take effort, and sometimes we're just too lazy to put forth the effort. I was visiting Lois Jones this week. You remember Lois? She's an little old lady, nice lady. She used to sit there in the same pew as Bob. She's doing well. Her family's taking good care of her. But I was up visiting her this week, and as I was talking to her, I was just trying to get a sense for, Lois, what do you do with your time since you're just kind of here all day? And how do you stay active? And she said, well, they've kind of got a loop in the house where they live, so she walks around it a couple times a day. And then she helps fold the laundry. And I was actually there when the laundry came out, and she said to her son, bring me some, but it keeps her active, keeps her moving. And I said, well, Lois, do you like to read? And she says to me, oh, yes, I've always loved to read. She's like, oh, good, that'll give you something to do. And I kind of shared with her, I always like to read too, but I don't do it a whole lot anymore. And it just kind of hit me right in that moment. So I said it out loud. I said, I'm too lazy to read. And you think, too lazy to read? What? That's like the easiest thing you can do. Oh, not true, because when you're reading, you have to hold the book, right? And your mind has to be working at least, as opposed to just turning on the television, just sitting there and absorbing whatever it throws at you. So I said, I'm too lazy to read, and maybe that's the truth. I don't know. But you see, that laziness gets into us, and it can hinder us from doing things like reading, but also hinder us from going and blessing others. So we have to watch out for it. Because in Matthew chapter 25, Jesus tells another story about a man who's got some wealth and he's going away. So he gives some of his money to a servant. And he says, go take care of this, use this money to do my business while I'm away. Invest this, whatever, and I'll come back, and we can settle accounts then. So the master goes away, and he comes back, and the servant comes to him, and he brings him the exact amount of money that the master had given him to start with. And he explains, I didn't want to lose this, so I just kind of buried it. And so here's your money back. And the master's angry. He's angry because the servant, he squandered the opportunity to invest the master's money into the master's business. He didn't do it. And the master uses two words to describe that servant. Care to guess what the first one is? It's lazy. He says, you're lazy. The second one is wicked. He says, you lazy, wicked servant. The servant is wicked because he was lazy and didn't do his master's work with the resources the master had given him. See, when we fail to do our master's work with the resources he gives us, when we fail to do God's good work of blessing others out of the abundance that he has given to us, we're not only lazy, but that laziness has kind of led us into wickedness. So we have to watch out for that, because we have to be aware that God gives us opportunities to bless other people all the time. And sometimes we're just saying, no, because we're lazy. And in those situations, we're not only lazy, we're wicked. And that's a word we don't like to use about ourselves. If someone even implies that we're wicked, we get all angry, right? We get up in arms, right? Because we're the Christian people. We're the good guys. We're not wicked. We might not be wicked people, but we can do wicked things. Or we could act wickedly by not doing things. And that's when when we give into that laziness, when we're too lazy to bless other people. We're lazy, and so we're wicked. Sometimes we're not about the work of blessing others as God would have us do because we're selfish. And that's another one that's kind of difficult to accept, because no one wants to admit we're selfish. No one goes around bragging about how selfish they were this week, right? Has anybody done that this week? No, we don't. In his book, Missional Renaissance, Reggie McNeil tells us, he writes that the act of blessing people carries with it risks. You risk what you have, but we're selfish and we don't want to risk it. It carries risks, but it also comes with rewards. You see, if you're out there trying to bless other people, they just might invite you into their pain and into their suffering when they find out you care. But we're selfish, and our time is our time. We don't want to be dragged into other people's issues and drama and hurt and pain. Leave me alone to enjoy my own blessing. You see, we're selfish. And we want to hold on to that. But we find that when we get past that selfishness, and we do go out and bless people out of what we have, then we're also invited not only into their pain, but also into their joy. McNeil tells a story in his book about a man who was a follower of Jesus, who frequented a sporting goods store in his area. And he was in the sporting goods store one day, and he saw the manager there, and he kind of knew who the manager was because, hey, he was a comeback customer. And it seemed like the manager just wasn't having a great time. So the man thought, well, I'll bless this manager. Let's call the man Bill, because it's easier for me to tell the story. So Bill says he's going to bless the manager and just go up and ask him how he's doing. Give him an opportunity to talk about it. And maybe he thought, well, I'll just ask, and the manager will say, fine, and then I'll feel good about myself because I did my good deed and asked, and we'll be on. But no, for whatever reason, when Bill asked the question, this time the manager kind of took him up on the opportunity to be blessed and just started talking, just kind of unloaded. He needed someone to talk to. And so he just started unloading. He said, I'd rather be any place than here right now. I'm working over 60 hours a week. I'm not making enough money. And I think I've pretty much lost my marriage. And so Bill, if this were me, if I were Bill, I'd be sitting there thinking, oh, crud. I just wanted to seem like a nice guy when I asked. I didn't want to be invited into all this, right? I got my own stuff to worry about. He seemed selfish. But it seemed to help the manager to talk about it. So Bill stayed and listened. And at the end of the conversation, Bill said, I'm going to ask God to help you. And Bill didn't just say it, he did. So the next several days, Bill, when he was prayed for the manager and his situation. Well, several days later, Bill stops back into the sporting goods store, and the manager's flagging him down. And if it were me, I'd be like, oh no, is this what's going to happen every time I come in here now, right? Because I'm selfish. But no, the manager flags him down with good news. He says, out of the blue, I received an offer to buy this place, so I'm going to be making enough money for my family now, and my wife has agreed to go to counseling in just 4 days. What a change, right? God loves showing up when we push past our selfishness to bless other people. And God's going to show up in there and do many great things. See, blessing people in small ways is relatively easy. So often now, if I'm honest with myself, the reason I'm not about the business of blessing others is because I know they might open themselves up to me. Their hurt, their needs, their neediness. And well, I just don't want that, right? That takes time, that takes emotional effort and fortitude. And I'm selfish. I don't want to give those things to that person. I want to keep them for myself. I want to be doing what I want to do. I want to be free to come and go and do as I please. If an opportunity comes up, I want to be free. I don't want to be bogged down by other people and their problems and maybe their pain and the opportunities that might come my way to serve them. But when we get past that selfishness and we get about God's business of blessing others, God always shows up in exciting ways. And I think maybe this is one of the reasons so many people in churches nowadays, we're bored with God, we're bored with our faith, we're bored with church because we're being selfish. And instead of blessing others, we're hoarding the blessings. And we're not out there blessing others in ways that God's going to come in and just show us how good and how great He is. And we're not doing things so that He can demonstrate to us how much good He is willing to do in this world through us. And so we're bored because we're being too selfish to bless others. And sometimes we don't bless others because we're afraid. When we bless others, when we speak a word of encouragement into their lives, when we care for them, when in some way we do something to help them, even though we might not know them at all, we know that at least some of the times people are going to ask the question, why? Why are you doing this? Why do you care? Why are you being nice? Why'd you do this for me? Some of you know, because we've all experienced that, right? You've blessed somebody and they ask you why. And right here, this is the point of entry, where we go from general blessing into the specific ultimate blessing of welcoming people into faith in Jesus Christ. Because they ask us why, and the answer is, well, because I care about you, because God cares for me, and God cares for you, and He loves you, and He wants you to know about that love. He wants you to experience His blessing. And the greatest way to do that is through His Son, Jesus Christ. You see, right there, that's the place. And going to that place, saying those things, bringing people into that ultimate blessing, that's scary for a lot of us. We're afraid of that. See, often we're about the work of blessing others, and some of you are really good at blessing others. And the rest of us, we just kind of mimic you at our best moments. But we go about the work of blessing others, but sadly, many of us regularly fail to complete the circle by making sure the people who receive the blessing know it's ultimately from God. And so the person who receives the blessing doesn't connect the dots of that blessing back to God. And so even though we've done God's good work of blessing, God's not really magnified. God's not glorified in what we're doing. We're afraid to bring the ultimate blessing. We're afraid to bring God and Jesus into the conversation because people might laugh at us. They might snort at us. They might shun us. They might make fun of us. They might roll their eyes at us. They might grunt at us. They might smirk. Whatever. One mainline denominational leader, when he was speaking about the different ways people in his denomination are blessing others, he pointed out a problem and that it's falling short because he said, we have just been too afraid to mention Jesus. We're afraid. And so that greater blessing, the ultimate blessing of someone getting to know God better, drawing closer to God by faith in Jesus Christ, it's lost. It's missed. Because we're afraid. See, being selfish and afraid, they sometimes hold us back from blessing other people. And we need to fight past that. We need to be aware of that and go past it because we're missing out. Let me take you back to Matthew 28, to the Great Commission. And some of you are like, oh, the Great Commission again. We talk about it all the time. Yes, we do. But get it, it's that important. But let me take you back to the Great Commission in Matthew 28. Jim, put it up there. 28, verse 19, Jesus said, all authority in heaven and earth has been given to me. Therefore go and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and of the Son and the Holy Spirit, and teaching them to obey everything I've taught you. And surely I am with you always to the very end of the age. This is maybe a part that we don't emphasize as much here when we talk about this. But this is Jesus saying, surely I'm with you always to the very end of the age. Jesus says that his presence goes with us. When? Always. Always. How certain can we be about that? Well, Jesus says surely. There's no doubt at all. Jesus' presence goes with us. So when we see an opportunity to bless other people, when God gives us that opportunity and the devil whispers in our ear, you need to be afraid. Afraid that person might laugh at you if you bless them. Afraid that person might take advantage of you. You need to be afraid that they'll think you're one of those weird blessings people. There's no truth to that. We surely know there's nothing to be afraid of because Jesus is right there with us. Jesus says, go make disciples of all nations. Go take my blessing to people all over this world, starting with the people right around you. And he tells us, or indicates here, no matter what mess you might get into in doing that, I'm with you. I'm there with you always. There's no cause for fear. Perfect love casts out fear. And Jesus' perfect love goes with us everywhere we go. This is no reason to be afraid to bless others. This also speaks to us on a level of being too selfish to bless others. When we're selfish with God's blessings, we hoard them in our lives. And we fill up our lives with these lesser blessings that God gives us. So the greater, bigger blessing is Jesus coming and saying, hey, here's my presence. Let it be in your life. And we say, sorry, Jesus, I got all these other things in my life. I don't have enough room to make more room for you. Right? So we miss out on deeper, more complete presence of Jesus in our lives. See, every day, God puts us in situations where we have the opportunity to bless others. And if we're honest, pretty much all of us have to say, at least some of the times, we overlook those opportunities. We ignore them. We forget, right? And we have reasons. We're lazy, we're afraid, we're selfish. Maybe something else has occurred to you that hinders you while I've been speaking. So we must fight against those things that would hinder us from blessing others, because as we see here, they're not legitimate reasons. And as we see here, we rob ourselves. When we indulge in those things, we rob ourselves of greater blessing, greater joy. It all comes down to what James writes in the second letter of his letter to the churches. Put it up there, Jim. I might have mentioned James before. He might be one of my favorite books of the Bible. But here is James chapter 2. Suppose a brother or a sister is without clothes and daily food. If one of you says to them, go in peace, keep warm and well fed, but does nothing about their physical needs, what good is it? What good is it? James talks about seeing people who need something. In this case, they need some very important things, clothes and daily food. They need a blessing. And he talks about merely telling them, oh, go be well. Now, I hope it works out for you. And doing nothing else. And sometimes that's us, isn't it? We see people in need, or they need something or could benefit from something we've got. We could bless them, even if it's just with a word of encouragement. And we see people, and we merely, we might wish them well. I hope it works out for you. And we do nothing about it. We're too lazy, or we're too selfish, or we're too afraid, or whatever. But we feel good about ourselves because at least I acknowledge that I saw the problem. Woohoo. James gets it right when he says, what good is it? What good are you? What's that do? The implication here is that James is wanting us to fight through whatever it is that is hindering us from blessing other people. We instead pass God's blessing on to other people. We go bless people out of what God has given us. And he's given us everything in Christ Jesus. Twice I've been to Haiti building rubble homes. Part of our relief efforts after the earthquake that hit down there 6 or 7 years ago that destroyed so much of the country. And twice the experience was totally miserable. It's not fun. Because, I'm lazy. I don't like manual labor, especially out in the hot humidity when it's 90 degrees with 300% humidity in January. No, I'm selfish. I like living in my blessing, in my American spoiledness, where everything's temperature controlled. We got air conditioning, we got heat, whatever it is, it's perfect. And I'm afraid. Haiti, for an American Christian, if you don't go there with the right people and with someone who knows what they're doing, it's a scary place, man. I'll never forget, on my second trip down there, we arrived at the mission compound, and I knew what to expect because I'd been there before. But there were people on our trip, they were newbies. And I watched them. We got to the mission compound, and there are these big metal gates, and they unlock them, and they open them. And we kind of go in, we take our stuff in, and then behind us, they close those metal gates, and they lock them. And the newbies just get this look in their face like, what have I done? What goes on here that I need to be locked away for safety? It's scary. It's scary because you see the evidence of voodoo practices. You hear, you might be out on the roof at night, you're just trying to cool down, and you hear the voodoo drums. Or at one point, we were praying over a new home that we had just gotten done building, and the family was moving in. And as we were praying, there were those forces of darkness, those voodoo people working around the corner, doing their stuff as we were saying our blessing from God over this place. So you get this idea this is a place that maybe not be fully safe for an American Christian. It's scary. I experienced all that on my first trip. And I got to be honest with you, I hated it. But I went back because God called me to take his blessing in that way. God doesn't call everyone to bless others in that way, but that's how he called me. So I had to fight past my laziness, had to fight past my selfishness, had to fight past my fear so that I might take God's blessing to others. It's difficult. They're right there. The practical takeaway for you all this week, it's similar to last week, but just this added nuance to it. I want you to go out and find 3 people beyond what you're already doing. Find 3 people and find a way to bless them. Do something simple to care for them, maybe words of encouragement, whatever. But here it is. Fight past your laziness. Fight past your selfishness. Fight past your fear or whatever hinders you to go bless these people. Start trying to make it a habit. of finding, searching for people in your life that God gives you to bless in everyday moments. And when laziness or selfishness or fear creep in, fight past it. I want you to lean into Jesus. Lean into that constant presence of Jesus that goes with you everywhere you go, so that you might overcome those things and that you might glorify God by going and blessing other people. Let's pray.